Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Dorian, and you're listening to Highway to Scale. It's a podcast in which we explore the ins and outs of business success and where we cover topics like validating business ideas, exploring different management styles, building products, launching them on the market, raising capital, and scaling your business. Now, before we get to the main part, please consider subscribing and get in touch with me if you want to be a guest on the show. In today's episode, I'm joined by Mustafa, who is the CEO of MishiPay. It's a company that brings the best of the online checkout experience to physical stores. It gives shoppers the ability to scan and pay for their shopping with their mobile phones. MishiPay is now the world's leading provider of mobile self-checkout technology, with customers such as Flying Tiger Copenhagen, MUJI, SPAR and Eroski. As for Mustafa, he is a mechatronic engineer who has previously worked in and led projects with companies such as Porsche, National Instruments, Barclays and TATA, and he has a proven track record in successful innovation. And in 2019, he got his spot on the prestigious Forbes 30 Under 30 list. In this podcast, Mustafa will tell us about the present and the future of the retail industry, what does it take to change customer habits, and why is a properly structured team crucial for company growth. So let's cut the intro and let's jump right into the episode to see what Mustafa can teach us about building a business. Mustafa, it's so great to have you with me on the Highway to Scale. Welcome.
Thank you, Dorian. Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
So let's start with the basics. Can you tell me a little bit more about your business beginnings and your company? How did you start?
Of course. The beginning, I think it's best to start with how I had the idea, right? I had the idea for MishiPay when I was waiting in a line. I waited 20 minutes to buy a Coke. And I was actually at a supermarket, and it's the kind of supermarket where you always have lines, and it obviously wasn't the first time that I was waiting in a line. And of course, everyone has had that experience at some point or the other. But for some reason, when I waited in this line in 2015, I thought to myself, why the hell am I still doing this way? It's the 21st century. And in my mind, it just fit that my phone's camera is strong enough to scan a barcode. My mobile is already being used for payments, and Apple Pay was just about to launch in the UK. And I was also thinking that, using RFID, you can secure the items, or you can have the staff provide some kind of security. Surely there's a way also to do that. So then why aren't we doing on our phone exactly what we can do at the cash register? I mean, the phone should be smarter than the cash register, should be able to connect to backend, things like that. So in my mind, it just fit very well that, if you use the cloud as one node, you can connect to retail store backend, you can use the phone for scanning, you can use the phone for payment. So all the elements were there. And I thought, surely there's a possibility to just scan, pay and go. Let's look into it. And then, lucky for me, I started it. There was a market. I saw that it's a huge problem. There were already studies out there showing that, retailers are losing hundreds of billions of pounds every year. I think the most recent one from Adyen showing 284 billion lost in annual sales due to queuing. So, this was good. It validated. But 3 or 4 months later, I had a basic but first prototype. And then I brought on my co-founder and CTO, Tanvi, who's also my best friend since so many years. And she's, someone who's been there through everything in the MishiPay journey. And I was very lucky that, just as I was realizing that I'm not a good enough software engineer to do this on my own, Tanvi was sort of available. The company she was working for, where she built the whole iOS platform, was about to get acquired. And she had a chance to go there. But lucky for me, she liked what we did at MishiPay instead. She actually just started to help me out as a friend. And a week after, she was like, I want to do this. And I said, okay, that's great.
That's an amazing story. So how did you decide to create the prototype yourself? A lot of CEOs, when they have the idea, their first thought is, okay, I need to gather a team.
Yeah, I think the difference first is that I am an engineer by training, a mechatronic engineer. So I have had lots of experience building things before building MishiPay. Not so much software projects. I was more on the hardware side. Mechatronics is
Yeah.
electronics, mechanical engineering together. So I had built more electronic circuits and robots, but I had written code for them too. C++, later on with some Java, even in the early days, assembly code. So I had done coding to a degree, but never just a full software project, right? The code I was writing was
Hmm.
mostly very functional to get a motor to send a certain signal, or to get this much torque into the motor, or to get an arm to do a certain thing, or for a control system to correct towards the mean based on the error. Those kinds of things that we were coding on, and I'd done some exciting projects for Porsche and National Instruments. So the foundation, it's good that I was not scared of technology, right? That's the first
Yeah.
element.
Yeah.
That I was not like, okay, what is this? This is like crazy. I can't even look at it, right? I knew my way around a shell. I knew my way around terminal. I was able to teach myself some basic Python to do some coding needed, especially because the first point was the prototype, right? Proving that this works in terms of scanning and RFID. There was also some good app building softwares I could leverage. So the prototype for me, first of all, was not that scary a thing to build. But secondly, it was also important to build it to know that it works in reality the way it does in my head, as a
Hmm.
validation for me before anyone else. Because in the past, before MishiPay, I had 23 other ideas, right?
Oh, wow.
And one of them I had actually implemented, which was a sort of, to a degree, which was a home delivery of Indian home cooked food, right? And it was in Manchester, ran it for a few weeks. It was actually successful, but I was not that into it. And I had
Hmm.
moved to London already to start my master's at UCL. So I left that. But other than that one, really all other ideas required a lot of different knowledge I did not have, and required just so many things for me. I could not see the first two steps. I often, if I'm coaching any young, entrepreneurs, or people in startups, I often say, like, you want the big vision, you want the goal, but you also want to know at least your first two steps. You don't need to know
Yeah.
every step along the way, but the first two, like, where do you start? And with the others, like, which required huge investments, or I just didn't know the science of it. Compared to that, with MishiPay, I felt like I knew where to start. I knew the basic elements, and I was able to start putting together things, putting together an app, putting together some
Hmm.
Arduino and Raspberry Pi equipment to build some prototypes, and to build a mock-up of a store and how it looked. And that gave me a lot of confidence that this is in fact possible. It's not just a vague dream.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that got me into it. But of course, I soon realized, like, now if you want to integrate this into retailer backend, etc., you need to really be into the software, and you need to enjoy that. And that was not me. And lucky for me, I had a best friend for whom it was that. Because it's very difficult to find a co-founder that you can trust, one that you can have a really big fight argument with about the business, and then the next hour be okay going out for a dinner or a drink, right? You need to have that kind of relationship, and that's very, very tough to build with someone you don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I completely understand it, because between co-founders, it's always, well, in most cases, it's like a struggle. They start with, we're the bestest of friends. We want to make this work, but then power play comes into the game.
Yeah. It's about whether people are actually happy with their roles that they play, right? I mean,
Hmm.
everyone needs to realize, like, there is the founder, then there are co-founders, or whoever there may be, and at the beginning, you're all sort of doing everything, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's true.
you mature over time, and you need to go from generalization to specialization. And while that is happening, there will be roles that are formed. There will be a CEO, and normally one. There is going to be a different CTO. There is going to be someone who looks after other areas, right? In the beginning,
Hmm.
even I would in fact say that at the very beginning, still there is the emphasis of someone who's selling and someone who's building, right? At that time,
True.
it doesn't need to be defined in a structure. Just I sell, you build, or you sell, I build, whatever may be your structure, right? As long as you can divide people on those grounds. But eventually, you also need to have the structure of a CEO, a CTO, and other functions. And when that happens, it's about people being very happy in the role they play towards the bigger goal. If they're not, then you see the problems with things like power play,
Mhm.
etc. Right? If you want
Yeah,
each
yeah.
other's job, you're not going to be that happy.
Now that we're on the topic of roles that you mentioned, like a CEO, CTO, can we focus a little bit about on your role? You're a CEO of the company. What are you currently focused on the most?
I think keeping the company running. But the way I think about it, the as a CEO, I had a very good advice from a mentor when I started. Who often said that as a CEO, you need to keep on three levers, right? You need to think about
Okay.
lever, which is your technology, which is essentially the product you build, which is what you need to sell. It may not be technology in some cases, right? But if it's technology, then your tech, your product is the first lever. The second one is your sales, because if you build something, you need to sell it. And the third one is sort of the plan to fund the whole thing, right? Whether that be through external fundraising or it be through bootstrapping or whatever, or loan, whatever your method, right, that you've
Yeah.
chosen. But you need to think of things in sort of these three buckets. I still think it fits generally, right? Building, selling, and funding. That's sort of the three ways. With MishiPay, there's a slight further added element that selling for us is not just selling to one type of people, right? It's not just the retailers or B2B. For us, it's also the shoppers, who you can call it like
Yeah.
sort of acquiring or selling. You can think of it in a similar way. So we need, as a marketplace, we need our retail shops, but we also need our shoppers, and both have to come together. So the selling is slightly nuanced and more complicated depending on who you're selling to. But the same thing happens with the product, right? It eventually divides. For us, payments is a different section and security is a different section. Core development is different than optimization. Those divide, but still, at the end of the day, I could divide everything into one of those three buckets. What might be on top of them or surround them is hiring, right? So
Yeah.
if I think about
Exactly.
my time goes number one in making sure I have the right team around me, in hiring, right? And then giving that team the resources they need to succeed, whether it be with the funding in terms of money, whether it be in terms of my time and knowledge in that area, whether it be by finding them the right kinds of mentors and advisors in those areas, funding the learning and development of the team. So yeah, finding the right team, funding that same team with the right resource. So that resource does not have to be money, time, and other things. And finally, I think the other part of being a CEO is making sure that you're on track towards the vision, right? My leadership style focuses a lot on outcome. My CFO, who's also a great, in a way, friend and mentor, often says that there's a difference between the input, the output, and the outcome. And
Yeah. True.
if I think about it that way, then yeah, input, the hours you put in, the work you put in. Output is actually the output of the work. So, for example, you developed an app. Here's the app. That's an output. But the outcome is actually what we need to care about, especially as a CEO, which is that how many people use that app, how many people actually, are paying you as customers, how many people are, how much are people buying using the app, whatever your metric of outcome. That's the focus, and keeping the team aligned to that vision while having goals along the way is a big part. So I would say those three things, right? The hiring, the giving the resource to those hires to succeed, and then keeping everyone on mission, while thinking of the original three buckets of the product, the selling, and the funding. That's the way I like to break them down.
Yeah, this is great. I'll actually steal this three buckets theory from you, because until now, I've always looked at CEOs basically in two categories. I know CEOs who are extremely tech focused on the product, on the development part, and those who are focused exclusively on the business. And they rarely think about the other side. And that's when their products start to fail, or it's not working as they planned. They
Cannot be
then
a
have to
tech
hire a
company
bigger team.
CEO without being focused on the tech, right? Just like you cannot be the CEO of a specific product company, like a manufacturing company, right? Without being interested in actually the manufacturing part and how your
Yeah,
factories
yeah,
operate.
that is true. That is true. So let's talk a bit more about MishiPay as a platform. Let's say I'm a retailer who wants to implement this into my store. What do I need to do? how difficult it is for me to get your technology into my store?
Just call me or go on MishiPay website and fill the contact form. Uh, no, but in all seriousness, once a retailer signs with us and they want to go live, we have actually put a lot of work into making that easier. But if you think about it in the beginning, it's actually complicated because you have to have the inventory connected into MishiPay so that we know what the customers are scanning. If I scan the barcode of an item, I need to know the name, picture, price, at the very minimum, and also potentially the promotion. So that's the second integration, the promotion from their side into us. And we have our promo engine that can today apply more than 150 unique promotion types, right? That
Great.
makes more than 6,500 promotion combinations on baskets that we're applying. So it's the promotions, so product details, promotions, and within the product details, sometimes we may have inventory if we're doing click and collect with them too, which is an added product on Scan and Go. We may also have to integrate with their payment gateway. So depending on the gateway the retailer is using, we could let them use their own, or we will let them use one of our gateway partners if they don't want to bother with using their own gateway, if that's more time consuming. But we have today integrated more than 16 gateways. There's also then sometimes the loyalty card, right? So if you're collecting points, if your points are equal to money at a retailer, and especially where a lot of your shoppers are using it, we have to integrate that into the app. And then some cases we may have an integration with the RFID system, but that may not be the case in most retailers. The last one, but perhaps the most important, is that after the purchase, we need to make sure that the transactions go into the retailer's POS or ERP system, where they need to see that, okay, this sale was done with this store, we have to expect this much money in this account, right? All that has to be synchronized and reconciled on their side. This used to take us 3 to 4 months to do in the beginning, and retailers will tell you that they have done projects where these number of integrations would happen over 12 to 18 months. But now we have brought it down to as little as 2 weeks. And this has happened because through the pandemic, we built so much automation in our system. Since we have done so many of these now, we know what to expect, right? At big retailers, that, okay, their product file will be of this category or that category. Their promotions will be like this or like that. So we've got finite number of options per integration, which means that we can now start to build standardization automation around it. So if a retailer agrees to our standard formats, we can go live in as little as 2 weeks. If they don't and they want customizations, we have still gone live with every retailer that we've done in the last 12 months in less than 1 month. So we still maintain
That's
a
amazing.
super high speed of going live, and that's a big advantage for us, right? Because a retailer, with the number of projects they have, the priority is, if you can go live really quickly and cheaply, then it's something they want to try out even faster.
This is the thing I don't understand. This entire process that you just explained, this sounds to me extremely simple, but there are still not a lot of stores that use those types of technologies. Basically, we're here in Croatia. I haven't seen a store that uses MishiPay, or let's say any other competitor that maybe offers something similar. One of the largest retailers in Croatia, instead of implementing this type of technology, when the pandemic started, they implemented those, self-checkout automated machines.
Yeah. So
why is that?
I think partly with the kiosk one, retailers do what they know, right? Just like any other company, they know the kiosk, they've seen the kiosk at other places. They're like, okay, those guys are using it. We want to use it too. We don't need to investigate. We don't need to find out. Just give me what they have, right? So a part of it is that when it comes to the kiosk, there's a known element. It's known how to implement it, how to deploy it. Everything is sort of scripted now, right? Because retailers started implementing it 10 years ago. So there's a part of that, which is that, anything new, retailers are usually apprehensive of. They need to see it working at peers, and the first group of sort of more visionary retailers will take it, show the benefit of it, and others will follow. But the second element is that it's not as easy as it sounds to just scan a barcode and pay for an item and leave the store. It sounds quite simple from a front end. But as I explained,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
the 6 integrations in the background, integrating those and synchronizing them in real time while doing it across many retailers, many regions, many stores starts to add many orders of magnitude of complexity into the system. So it's actually quite difficult to do well. It's easy to do as a prototype, very difficult to do well. And that is what, we've seen retailers struggle with. We've seen that when they try to build themselves, as some of them have tried, it's taken them 18 to 24 months to build an MVP and then another 18 to 24 months to scale. Right? So it takes a significant amount of time because of keeping all this stable in the background. Because remember, there's a further change that the requirement of stability is very, very high inside the store versus, and of course you have scale with thousands of stores versus something like online where, if the page doesn't work, you still want to buy the item, you'll refresh. But inside the store,
Yeah,
if something goes a little bit wrong on the phone, the user will immediately default to what they've been doing their whole life, which is going to the cash register. So it's
true.
it's
It's
all
true.
of these elements that make it harder to implement this. The other area of it, I think, on another note, one thing we have seen is that even if you get the tech right, there's a huge piece in terms of getting the ops and marketing correct. And this is where we are working very closely with our retailers to show them the way to market this to the shoppers and to be able to tell them how they should train their staff, which we help them with, how they should work them slowly into the system. Because it's natural for the staff to see this as a rival. We need to explain
Yeah,
to
of
them
course.
why this is their friend, why it makes their jobs easier, why it ensures keeping the job secure. Because if a store closes down, all the jobs are lost, right?
True,
But if
true.
there's fewer cashiers, most of the jobs in the store are still there, and plus more stores will open, which means eventually the more jobs will get created. So helping explain all of these things, putting it into the right equipment for onboarding is very important. What kind of material to have inside the store, what kind of things to do outside the store. All this is not really templated to a point where there's a clear playbook, and we're now inventing that playbook as we've done more deployments than any other scan and go across the world.
So can you share with us some results that your customers have had with the platform? What kind of benefits are they getting from it?
If you consider the sector by sector, particularly in the fashion and accessory sector, we've seen, and in travel, we've seen that they've got approximately 15 to 20% penetration of in-store transactions with people who were using MishiPay, were using the cash register and have now moved over to MishiPay. So that means almost 1 in 5 shoppers are using MishiPay instead of the cash register. That's huge for them. What's also important is that those shoppers are actually buying much more than they would in the cash register. Because of scanning, seeing the promotions in real time, being able to see the basket, they are
Yeah,
actually buying more by 30 to 50%, right? So that means that we're seeing a huge increase in overall store
it's
sales.
massive. Yeah,
So, if the stores, if you look at penetration times the increase in basket size, we're helping the store improve sales by, 7 to 10% in that case on a store by store basis. What we've seen on the other hand for grocery, and this is the one where we're truly unique, we're the only ones with an evidenced A/B test given to us by a retailer where they have seen that users who use MishiPay on average generate 14% more sales than users who do not use MishiPay on a per user basis net increase. That's what's very cool because they've seen that for these users and these guys, the grocery retailer who proved this has loyalty, so they know exactly how many times you came last year versus how many times you came this year, how much you have because of MishiPay increased your spending, because they also compared it with COVID. They saw that
yeah.
due to COVID, users anyways came back to the store a little bit less often and bought 11% more. With MishiPay, they saw that the users come back 33% more often and buy 27% more. So that's why you have 11% increase due to the pandemic, but a further 14% increase due to MishiPay and only attributable to MishiPay. So that is very, very exciting for us. And since we've had this, we've had so many more retailers show an interest, several more sign, and number of go lives are increasing. We're now at a point where we have several transactions every minute.
Oh wow, that's great. And basically for the customers, it's all about you go to the store with your phone, you scan, you pay, you can use, as you said, those promotions automatically within the app.
Exactly.
And then you can leave. No waiting in line, no nothing.
And we want to take out any friction. So just like in the B2B side, like I explained, we integrate. The reason we integrate because our whole ethos is around making sure you have no change of hardware, software, infrastructure. So we work with what you have. Same thing with store staff and training. The opposite is also true on the B2C side. I mean, on the opposite side, it's also true on the B2C side. We do not want you to have any friction. So we do not require you to download an app. You can just use MishiPay from your browser, right?
Oh, wow,
it
that's
does not
great.
require you to sign up. You can just go straight to the scanner. So all of that is to make sure that you get as quickly as possible to scanning your item and then buying your item.
Yeah, simplifying the entire process. No waiting, and basically, as you said, no friction at all. Can we talk a little bit about the investments that MishiPay got over the years? You've gone through a couple of funding rounds. Can you tell me what that process looked like? What kind of investors were you looking for?
So we have gone through we've gone through a couple of funding rounds. We've raised in our lifetime £5.5 million. I mean, we'll soon announce some more funding. The main thing that we were never really going out looking for funding as such, to be honest, after the first couple of months, because I started MishiPay as a business in August 2015. I first launched then Tanvi came on in around October. We launched our first store, which was a pop-up store in Spitalfields Market, December to Jan 2015 to 2016, right? So those 2 months. And after that is when I first thought about, we have to go out and raise, right? And I had that in my mind based on what I had seen, the media, this startup raises this many millions, this startup raises this many millions. We had an entrepreneurial finance course even at UCL that talked about the differences in, when you raise funding versus when you bootstrap. So we thought about that a little bit, and we thought, okay, we do not want to bootstrap because it looks like this is going to be a major business that's going to require a lot of funding for it to succeed in terms of, retailer acquisition, user acquisition, size of team. It's not the kind that we can grow differently. Like my father's business that he grew with nothing. Over 30 years and built a significant business out of without taking external funding on equity. So it's interesting that we thought about that early in terms of our scale and vision, that bootstrapping it would maybe take much longer or not be possible. So for us, that was the reason we first went out. But after we went out, we realized it's just a really huge time sink, right, to fundraise. And like people are not getting it. And the investors we were meeting when we were looking at angels just all thought we were too ambitious and that we were looking too high, which is how we luckily met the right kind of non-executive director, my professor from university who ended up investing, introduced us to someone. So that was very good, that we always had good advisors and mentors around us. Thanks to, some of my involvements around UCL, which got us into the right people. And then in University of Manchester, my bachelor's. And those two were actually the first external sources of funding in the company, because when we won the competition at UCL and we won the competition at Manchester, both of those gave us a grant, which together was £30,000. So that was the first external money in. Until then, was all the money that I had put in and Tanvi had put in into the company. Once we got that, we started to realize, okay, there is a way that we can use this money better. So we had the first interns, we had the first projects going live, we had the first sale. That's when, through this non-executive director we had brought on, we started to come together in a first pre-seed round, I would say, which was friends and family, some super angels in Europe and some in India. And together we raised about 150,000 pounds, right? That was the first one for us to start getting into the process of now let's approach retailers, etc. And we made a lot of mistakes there. Don't get me wrong, right? We spent too much time, and because time is money, eventually
Of
money,
course, yeah.
on the wrong areas, which were distractions. But it taught us for what should be the right areas to focus on. And that's when, 12 months after that, we raised 1.85 million pounds with Nauta Capital as the lead, as the seed investor. That was very important. But I feel like without that first 150, we might not have got far enough to actually be good enough for the 1.85 raise.
True.
And a very good advice I got early on, I think it was in Slush in 2016. I think it was like 30th November 2016 or 1st December, when we were there for a competition, and there was a man called Vitaly Golom, who was at the time the head of HP Tech Ventures. I think he's still
Okay.
an investor in Silicon Valley, and he he gave me and a couple others, we were sitting around as a sort of an advisory session that he was hosting, and he said that when you're fundraising, raise with a very clear goal that we are at A, we need the money to go to B, and when we reach B, you will give us more money because C is the next goal, right? And I was like, this is why you want to raise from seasoned investors who understand A and B and C, even if they don't mean traditional business metrics, right? Even if
Yeah,
they are
yeah.
not technically in revenue or in profits the way that a bank would look at it if they're giving you a loan. These can be in users, these can be in number of stores, these can be in number of transactions, whatever your metric is. And that sort of stuck with me. So if I think about it, every round we've had, the goals have been clear. The first 150,000 that we raised was to get to our first major retailer pilot, right? We did that at the end of 2017. So we raised the round 2016, we got that 2017. We did the round with Nauta Capital to get to our first rollout with a major retail customer. We did that end of 2018. And that's why in 2019 we raised the round with American Express Ventures, right? Now the point of that was to get to more than 1 million in sales. Now that we've done that, we're looking at the next level, right?
Yeah,
From
yeah.
1 million sales, our next important milestone is likely 1 million transactions a month, right? Because now sales is sort of done, transactions likely we come back, right? Because on both sides of our marketplace, one side is shops, the other side is shoppers. It's always going to be sort of chicken and egg. We broke that by first going after shops and then going after shoppers, but now we hope that this begins a flywheel of them supporting each other. So
Yeah,
in terms
yeah.
of funding, our funding was always sort of goal oriented, right? That we want to achieve this goal, and this is why we're raising the money.
This is the story that keeps repeating. I've interviewed a couple of CEOs until now, and they all have the same story. When you're a new company and you're looking to raise outside capital, look for people who can teach you, who can guide you, not just who will give you a lot of money.
Yes, exactly. I mean, a lot of money never made any problem worse. So a lot of money.
Of course, yeah.
But usually, as a first-time founder, it is harder to raise money, right? There's no doubt. You don't have any wins under your belt. And in my case, it was also my first job. I had not done any full-time job before MishiPay. So, for us, it was always important to prove ourselves, raise the money with a clear goal. What was also good is that we, since then, have never said, you know what, this 2, 3 months, I'm only doing fundraising and I'm not doing anything else. I have always continued to keep the business as the number one priority, and the funding of the business comes when your business is doing well anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you mentioned sales a couple of times. Can you tell me what does the sales process look like in your company?
So we have our sales now led by our new VP of sales, Mark O'Neill, and we've set up a model, which is a known model, which is the tempo model, right, where you have the different steps across the model, the target and engage and all these things to be able to divide where a client is throughout your sales pipeline. But with that, what's important is to structure your team accordingly, right? So the way we structure it is that we have a VP of sales We have business development directors or managers in all the important regions. Today, that is for us the Nordics, the UK, and the US. We are likely going to bring on Spain as the next one. The reason that these are the ones is because there we have cities where we have two or more MishiPay retailers, and so we see the opportunity for network effects where MishiPay could become part of your daily use activity, right? That's very important to us. And this is why we focus our attention there. The next level for us is the BDAs or SDRs. These are where these people are focused on lead generation, calling, making sure to get clients in to the pipeline. Overall, we've now dialed our sales pipeline down so that we have very clear focus on sales structure and a sales cycle of only 3 months. Because what we realize is that as a startup, you do not want to sell into customers where you need to convince them throughout the whole proposition, right? That is the kind of customer to keep on the side, or you can keep very few off in your pipeline because they're taking very, very long, right? Or this might be one you want to handle via partnerships. We are certainly doing that where we have reseller partners who have several salespeople talking to customers and selling MishiPay on our behalf in the territories where we are not focused full direct sales, sometimes in the direct sales territories with the help of our own sales guys. But these guys can continue to focus on a long sales cycle. But as a startup, if your sales cycle is full of those customers who are going to take 9, 12 months to close, you're doomed because you're never going to see progress quickly enough. And if those customers fall out, it's a big problem. So instead, you want to really look, rather than trying to look for people to sell to, you want to look for people who already want to buy, right? So you're really not looking for people to sell to. You're looking for people who already want to buy from you, right? And that is an important distinction to consider because that means that your conversations have a very different tone of just figuring out what is it that they want to buy, telling them about your proposition very clearly, and if those two fit, the sales cycle will move at a rocket pace.
Yeah, that is true. That's also the thing I'm going to steal from you. Now, I want to focus a little bit more on you. I saw that in almost all of the interviews that you did, you put an extremely strong emphasis on business scaling. Can you tell me more about this mindset?
Yeah, I think for us it's also part of the necessity that MishiPay is only impactful if it scales, right? Because sure, you might like to use a scan and go system in the one store if you're visiting it all the time and you feel like you're saving time there, but also you're having a much better journey when you use MishiPay, even if there is no line inside the store. But that's going to be few and far in between. If we want to add true value with MishiPay, we need to do it at scale. We need to be able to say, you know what, go to the high street, 1 out of every 2 shops, you're going to be able to use this app, right? So for us, it's important to achieve that at scale only can we achieve our full value. We have very strong value even at a small scale, which is a huge, huge benefit to us. We're very fortunate, but the true value only comes at full scale, right? So which is why important for us to scale, but also important for us to consider what it takes for that scale, right? Early on, we made a lot of mistakes in not realizing what it takes for those integrations to happen, in doing the same thing again and again, rather than trying to automate it, rather than trying to create, standardization that can be reused by everyone, right? That the process, putting that into your mindset, will save so much time and energy and money in a startup that it will allow you to scale. Because oftentimes I've seen that the blockers to scale aren't always the fact that you're of course there is the technical side and that has to be worked on, right? But oftentimes people work too early to scale that. They sort of pre-scale in the technical side, and that means that you end up building too much, whereas you should have actually listened first and then built more. So we've gone down that road. It's also not an easy one, still painful in many ways, but perhaps we waste less. But then you're not thinking about the other sides of the business that need to scale. You're only thinking the technology. And with the other sides, you think that, repetition or just hiring enough people will do that. Hiring is not easy, right? So you want
Of course, yeah.
as much as possible that you're teaching each other and you're taking out, the double work that is involved, the double effort. Because I see a lot of startups doing that, and doing that, scaling, no matter how much money you have, is going to be very, very difficult. So yeah, we put an emphasis on it because as a business, it's a necessity for us, but also to create efficiency for the money that we do raise to go much further than it does than it would otherwise.
You have a high focus on scaling your business, but can you tell me a little bit more about your management style?
For us, as I said, it's about outcomes. But I think that, when it comes to my management style, I've put it down into our core values as a business. And MishiPay's core values are abbreviated as Apple, actually, which is accountability, the pursuit of excellence, passion, learning, and empathy. And I feel like these really represent my own style and the way I think about it. For us, accountability means that, every important area has individual ownership of people, so that you take the credit for the success, but you're responsible for, and you take the burden of the failure to improve. But also it means that you have to think about what is every important area. And the important area to the business can only be mentioned by outcome. Does it generate, in our case, transactions, which results in users, or does it generate stores, which results in revenue? If it doesn't, it's probably not important enough to do. Then we have, the pursuit of excellence. Do you want to go above and beyond constantly of your own expectations? And are your expectations above that of your manager, which are above that of the end customer? Because that way, if you satisfy your expectation, you satisfy all three parties. Then it's about passion, where, what we mean by passion is that we don't take things just for granted. We are ready to have conflict. We're ready to argue about things. We're ready to have fights if we need to, because we're passionate about what we do. But it's about the work. Later on, we're happy to go ahead and be friends outside. But the point is that at work, we don't just take things for granted. Just like, if you're passionate about football, you don't just listen to someone's opinion about it without giving your own. You always have your own opinion that you want to fight for, and that's important because conflict creates better ideas, and that is important. We passionate people will have conflict. Then there is learning. There is the fact that we need to make sure everyone is growing constantly and has clear learning goals. This is why we have a learning and development budget per person in the company, per person per month. And finally, it's empathy. Nice. Where I think empathy is important towards three things: the mission, your each other, right? The mission, each other, and towards the customer. These three things you have to have empathy for, because if you do, then you feel happy when any of them are going well. You feel personally sad when they're not going well. And the way I think about it, it does not come in 1 week or 1 month, but after a few months of being in a company, if you're not feeling that empathetic towards your colleagues, your customer, the mission of the company, it's probably not where you should be spending, the golden part of your career, which is the case for most people who work in startups.
I love it how you basically put the entire mindset into your company values, because it makes it so much easier to propagate it through the entire company, so that all of your teammates are on the same page.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've gone through over the years with MishiPay. What were some of the hardest things that you had to do?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think the hardest stuff was, of course, over time, learning what not to do. Learning which people could not join us along the journey. Those things that you had to cut away during the journey are very, very difficult, whether that be product roadmap, whether that be certain customers, whether that be cool things you want to try out, but you don't have the time or access to do so. You have to have the discipline, or of course, the very tough part, which is the people, right? Some people are important for certain parts of the journey, cannot be with you through the next part. And that realization is very tough, and acting on it is even harder. But you have to, as CEO, but also generally as a senior manager in a startup, especially because you have so little time and so little availability of risk, given that you don't have a steady business as a bigger company would. So yeah, I would say those challenges are probably the ones I would point out most. Of course, there's the usual challenges everyone has. Your first big sale is always the hardest. Your first fundraise is always the hardest. Things like that are there, but I think they're par for the course. These are the things that sort of hit you from the side that you do not expect.
True.
And I would say perhaps prioritization, which means that actually deciding between two things you love to do, two very, very important things, you still have to cut one and keep one. That is actually what's tough, because deciding what is priority between many things that don't matter, that should not even be a question. It should not even be something on your mind. The other thing should be deleted. Yeah. But when everything seems like it is super important, still you should not do one of them and do the other. That is where prioritization truly comes in, where it's truly valuable, but also very, very difficult.
So how do you do it?
Focus on the outcome, right? Focus on the outcome. Which one generates the outcome that you need? Which one has the bigger guarantee versus you probably need to balance it with the size, right, of the outcome. If you think that guarantee and size is both there on one thing, then put your full focus on it and ignore everything else.
I have just one more question for you. What can we expect from MishiPay, let's say, in the next year or a couple of years?
I would say that expect us to be in a store near you very soon, probably in the next 12 months if you're in Europe, and then in every store near you within the next 2 to 4 years.
That's amazing. I am extremely looking forward to that.
Thank you so much. That's how we want every one of our shoppers to feel.
That's great. Mustafa, thank you once again for joining me on this podcast and for sharing all of these great insights with me and with all of our listeners.
Thank you so much, Dorian. Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here. Take care. Best of luck.
And we are done. If you stuck with us until the end, here are a few key takeaways from this episode that I want you to remember. Number 1, if you want your company to grow, you as a CEO need to handle 3 levers. The first one is your product. It's the thing you sell to your customers. The second one is your sales process. And the third one is the plan for funding your operation. 3 levers: building, selling, and funding. Number 2, user experience is crucial when you're looking to implement something new and innovative, because the moment a user encounters even a small error, they will immediately default back to the thing they know. And number 3, if you wish to succeed, you need to learn how to prioritize. And especially prioritize between 2 things you love to do. You as a CEO need to be able to cut one and continue with the other. Now, before you sign off, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when we publish new episodes. And leave us a review if you enjoyed this podcast and learned something new. It'll be highly appreciated. Also, if you want to be a guest on the show, shoot me an email or hit me up on LinkedIn. My contact info is down in the description. And that's it. I'm Dorian. You've been listening to Highway to Scale, and I'll see you all in the next episode.